Welcome back to Inside the System. I'm Jasmine Logan, and I'm joined by Emeritus Political Science Professor Dr. David Canervo. Today we'll be covering news in American politics relating to the U.S. Justice Department's recent investigations, our U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary's thoughts on the latest measles outbreak, and the looming potential for trade wars following President Trump's tariffs. So stay tuned. The DOJ is investigating bringing potential terrorism charges against pro-Palestinian protesters at Columbia University following campus protests last year. At the same time, prominent Palestinian activist and Columbia University graduate student Mahmoud Khalil sits in an ICE detention center. This is a result of his arrest this weekend and the Trump administration's attempt to deport him. Sherelle Hubbard has the latest details.
Pro-Palestinian protesters at Columbia University could soon be investigated under terrorism charges brought by the U.S. Justice Department.
We are also looking at whether Columbia's handling of earlier incidents violated civil rights laws and included terrorism crimes.
Friday, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said those who threaten acts of violence on behalf of Hamas, a designated terrorist organization, will be prosecuted. His comments come amid what the Justice Department calls a crackdown on anti-Semitism. The Trump administration has detained Mahmoud Khalil and whisked him off to Louisiana for deportation. A New York federal judge blocked any immediate effort to deport Khalil, but the administration is attempting to revoke his official permanent resident status. The New York Civil Liberties Union says the targeting of foreign students and pro-Palestinian demonstrators on college campuses is a violation of the First Amendment.
It's an attempt to bully the rest of us into being quiet and going with the administration's program. Last I heard, we were a democracy. This attempt to quell free speech is absolutely terrifying.
And his attorney says Khalil is a political prisoner.
This is a targeted, retaliatory, and extreme attack on the right of free expression.
I'm Sherelle Hubbard reporting.
Khalil remains there for now while lawyers on both sides urge a federal judge to expedite the court proceedings. Hundreds of protesters have been taking to the streets following his arrest. The federal judge overseeing the case has demanded Khalil have more access to his lawyer. However, the judge has not ordered his release from the federal detention facility. Dr. Canervo, there are different civil rights groups responding to this situation, and they believe that these actions and investigations are targeting our First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. What do you think about that?
Well, it does seem to me legitimate that there be an investigation about his First Amendment rights. Whether someone is a citizen or visitor to this country, the Constitution applies to them. And so they have the First Amendment rights that all of us have to be able to speak freely and to protest, to organize. And so it's legitimate, I think, for a judge to look into that. To have someone just arrested and immediately sent out of the country isn't very fair. And that's the kind of thing, again, that you would expect at a more authoritarian government. But here, normally there needs to be a hearing and investigation as to whether the actions by the government are justified.
Yes, I agree. And so they're attempting to deport Khalil because he participated in pro-Palestinian protests on his university campus. And, you know, like you said, protesting is one of the rights that we have, peaceful protesting, of course. And, you know, with that alone, that doesn't chalk up to terrorism or a crime, right? If there's violence or, you know, inciting hate, things like that, it's different. I do think, however, this whole Israel and Gaza situation is creating a lot of tension here in the U.S. There are people that are unhappy about it. There are people that are reacting to it, and I don't think our government is too keen on that.
Sure. Obviously, we have Palestinian students in this country taking advantage of our education system and other things that we have to offer. And when things happen in their country, they have the right to protest. My understanding is that no one was hurt in the protests, that certainly as a result that they have the right to speak their mind and do what they wish. And in this person's case, he is a citizen, as I understand it.
Yes,
and
sir,
so,
through marriage.
Certainly you don't deport citizens or take a person's citizenship away from them unless there's been a court ruling which has permitted that.
Exactly, I agree. And so I think it's so interesting. Khalil is a U.S. citizen by marriage. He has no criminal record. What do you think about Secretary of State Mark Rubio saying that he is revoking that citizenship himself?
Well, I don't know the law specifically, but I would guess that he does not have the unilateral right to just simply revoke someone's citizenship on his own. Again, it seems to me that there needs to be some sort of court procedure in which a judge is able to hear both sides of the case, and that there must be some rules or laws which stipulate what merits the revocation of citizenship. And so again, it seems to me Rubio's acting like a judge, jury, and executioner at the same time, rather than following the law and going through the normal legal processes, the due process, which everyone is guaranteed in this country.
Exactly, and so it'll be interesting to see how these court proceedings play out. And, you know, as we saw with that footage, even the Trump administration has a vested interest in this situation, like I said, with all of the conflict about the war in the Middle East. And there are people who feel that what's happening to the Palestinians is not okay, but there are also people who are taking it a step further and are, you know, putting out anti-Semitic statements and protests and things like that, which is completely different and definitely not okay.
Right.
But I guess we're just going to have to see how the courts are going to handle the situation. And I think it might set a precedent with these conflicts moving forward. But we'll be right back after this short break to discuss RFK's response to the latest measles outbreak.
College life can be challenging, but everyone at Austin Peay should have access to success no matter what the obstacles. Whether it's workshops, support, or just someone to talk to, the Student Disability Resource Center is there to help students overcome their challenges and experience college life to the fullest. Don't go it alone. The Student Disability Resource Center is there to help you. You'll find the center in room 114 in the Morgan UC, or call them at 221-7777, 221-7777. A campus reminder from APSU-TV.
The measles outbreak continues to spread across the southern and western parts of the country. There have been 260 cases in 3 states, and with the rising infections, state health officials are urging people to get vaccinated. In the meantime, the U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary continues to downplay vaccine effectiveness and safety. Reporter Michael Ushida has the story.
The deadly measles outbreak growing to 258 cases across 3 states. According to local health data, as of March 11th, there were 223 reported cases in Texas, 33 cases in New Mexico, and 2 cases in Oklahoma. State health departments and medical experts urging people to get vaccinated.
The vaccine is one of the safest, most effective vaccines we have. And 90% protection in 1 dose, 97% protection in 2 doses. Oftentimes it will give you lifelong immunity. Sometimes there'll be some slight waning.
Amid calls for more vaccinations to help slow the spread, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. downplaying the safety and long-term effectiveness of the vaccine.
When I were kids, everybody got measles. And measles gave you lifetime protection against measles infection. The vaccine doesn't do that. The vaccine is effective for some people for life, but many people it wanes.
Kennedy's comments drawing sharp rebuke from experts.
The head of health leadership in this country bungling basic facts at best and sharing outright lies at worst.
While there is some disagreement among experts about how much protection may wane, if at all, they all agree in most cases the measles vaccine does give lifelong immunity against the virus. This year's outbreak, mostly among children and driven largely by unvaccinated populations, is only the third time since 2000 where cases have risen above 200. In Washington, I'm Michael Yoshida reporting.
Last Thursday, the White House withdrew its nomination of Dr. Dave Weldon to serve as the director of U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Weldon's previous comments expressing vaccine skepticism had raised concerns among health experts. Dr. Canervo, medical experts agree that getting the measles vaccine is the best thing to do in this situation, and for most people can offer lifelong immunity, but RFK publicly continues to deny this. How do you think his ideas and statements about these health issues could affect Americans?
Well, I think they're likely to affect America in fairly negative ways, actually. The MMR shot, the measles, mumps, rubella shot, has been used for about 70 years. And as you said, doctors worldwide have considered it a safe and effective shot. Measles was considered gone from the United States just a few years ago. And when these stories started about the shots being dangerous to children, causing autism, it led to some parents, of course, not getting the shots for their children, and led to measles coming back again. And we know that at least there's been one death so far from the measles disease itself, not from the vaccine. And so what this does is take us back perhaps 50 or 60 years in history and in science by questioning and openly saying that these kinds of vaccines simply should not be used. And that's very sad to hear that. It's somewhat reminiscent of President Trump back during COVID, suggesting that maybe people should inject themselves with bleach, for which that is very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I would argue that to not let your children get vaccinated is very dangerous as well.
I agree. I mean, there are obviously parents that are concerned about their health and the health of their kids, their families, and you know, they don't want to give them something that could be potentially harmful, which is understandable. You know, you want your kids to grow up healthy and happy, but you know, following science seems to be the best way to do that. If our scientists and our experts, our medical experts, the ones treating us, the ones that we trust with our health, if they're saying that this is what's best, maybe we should listen. But it does get difficult when we have government officials in the public eye that undermine that.
Sure. Remember, RFK Jr. himself about a month ago suggested that vitamins of various kinds, castor oil, that those things would head off measles or cure measles, and there's no evidence for any of that from what doctors say. And so, again, that kind of advice, it seems to me, is really not serving the public well, as someone who is head of the public health services in this country.
I agree. I mean, we can't take medical advice that isn't credible and, like you said, has no evidence, right? The reason why we take these vaccines for these diseases is because there's evidence that it's beneficial.
Exactly. It seems to me that we need to be much more careful. It's in a way sad that President Trump nominated Kennedy to head HHS, because he has no medical background, no medical knowledge. There are some who have suggested that he was himself an illegal drug user in his youth. And so it seems to me that that sort of resume for the position that he holds is simply not adequate for the job that he has.
Yeah, and I think that's totally understandable. I agree. I mean, I find myself wondering what kind of qualifications he truly has to be saying these things about what could develop into a serious issue if not handled properly and effectively.
Yes, and you know, this leads, it seems to me, to a lot of confusion for the public, not knowing exactly who to believe, because as you say, when you've got a public official taking the position that vaccines may not be healthy and are certainly not necessary for the children, that leads to a lot of doubt. Obviously, parents don't want to hurt their children.
Of course.
But the chances of hurting them are really greater when they're not vaccinated than when they are.
Very true. So how seriously should we be taking these outbreaks?
Well, it seems to me that the way to treat the outbreak is to encourage children who are not vaccinated to get vaccinated, and to try to let them know that there are no good alternatives, and to let parents know that the measles, while not usually dangerous, certainly in certain situations can be.
Of course, and so if we don't want the measles to spread even more, we should take the proper action and precaution to prevent it. I agree.
That's right.
Well, we'll be right back after this short break to discuss the potential for a trade war, so stay tuned.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Thanks for sticking around. To close out our segment today, we'll be talking about the impact of President Donald Trump's tariffs. Trade wars are still brewing in a global tit for tat. Last Thursday, Trump threatened to put a massive 200% tariff on alcohol from the European Union. This was in response to the EU's retaliation against Trump's 25% steel and aluminum tariffs that went into effect last Wednesday. In a social media post, the president said the proposed tariff will go into effect unless the EU rescinds a 50% tariff imposed Wednesday on U.S. spirits. Sherelle Hubbard has the latest on the financial fight.
I'm not going to bend at all.
President Donald Trump resolute. He says he's not bending on steel and aluminum tariffs, but car repair shops say you may have to.
The main concern is seeing what the domino effect is going to be on the overall cost of price of parts.
America's spirit industry also bracing for pain from the retaliatory tariffs. Trump said he could impose a 200% tariff on alcoholic beverages from the European Union after the EU imposed a 50% tariff on U.S. spirits like bourbon. In Canada, several retailers have taken U.S.-made beer, wine, and spirits off their shelves.
This is a dumb trade war. It is utterly absurd, and we don't really understand why you would pick a fight with your best friend who has only ever been a really good partner to you.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick met with Ontario Premier Doug Ford and other Canadian officials Thursday evening. Just last week, Ford said his province was implementing a 25% tariff on electricity exports to 3 U.S. states and threatened to cut off Ontario energy exports to the U.S. After today's meeting, he said the temperature is being lowered and they agreed to more meetings.
We want the best outcome for both countries. We're like a family. And sometimes there's tension between families.
I'm Sherelle Hubbard reporting.
U.S. companies are adjusting their financial projections due to the Trump administration's tariffs on imports. During an earnings call on Thursday, Dollar General's CEO said inflation is causing many low and middle-income consumers to buy less. Other companies are also bracing. This week, Delta Airlines slashed its profit outlook, and Kohl's announced it expects sales could drop in 2025. Dr. Canervo, Trump is hitting our largest trading partners with these tariffs. How is this going to affect American consumers and the policies that they care about?
Well, it's kind of a sad way to treat friends, like Canada and Mexico. One of the big results from these tariffs is going to be higher prices for Americans. Mm-hmm. Consumers, of course, are going to have to eventually buy cars, and one of the things that goes into cars are aluminum and steel. And so as tariffs are placed on those two commodities, what you find is that the price of cars is going to go much higher. Mm-hmm. Some are predicting $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 or more higher, depending on the car. Electricity is purchased from Canada by people in the states of Minnesota and Michigan. As Canada puts on tariffs on those things, which Americans buy, they're going to have to pay more money. And of course, the electricity tariffs are simply as a result, retaliation against the United States for what we're doing with our current tariffs. Hmm. If you look at simply the states of Kentucky and Tennessee, one of the major products from both of these states is alcohol. And we've seen that in the stores in Canada that American-made liquor, whiskey, has been taken off of the shelves.
Yes.
We have, of course, Jack Daniel and Jim Beam, for example. Mm-hmm. Others. Kentucky is known as a bourbon state, and so it depends on that for money coming into the state. And so all the way around, it seems to me that these small store owners are losing out. Homeowners in the north are losing out with electricity costs. The consumers around the country who are going to be buying cars are going to have to pay more money. Housing has already gotten more expensive. And so with the inflation that we're experiencing, this is simply adding to it rather than fixing the problem.
I agree. I mean, I feel like it was made pretty clear this past election cycle that Americans are worried about inflation, they're worried about the economy, and they don't want prices to keep rising. And so it's interesting that these tariffs are going to do just that, right? I think a main reason that people elected President Trump is to help better the economy, right? And it doesn't seem like these steps are getting us closer to that direction, in my opinion.
Well, that's right. And of course, one of the excuses that Trump uses for the tariffs for Mexico and Canada is drugs and immigration.
Yes.
And in the case of Canada, there is quite a little illegal immigration from that border. Mm-hmm. And the drug trafficking in the northern border is also fairly small compared to what comes across the Mexican border. Mm-hmm. And so in the case of Canada particularly, the excuse that we're using this tariff to cut down on drugs and illegal immigration really is a pretty weak argument.
I
agree.
Seems to me.
With Mexico, there is more of a drug problem, more of an immigration problem. But again, I'm not sure that those tariffs themselves are necessarily going to get at the problem of either drugs or illegal immigration.
I agree. I don't think that really addresses the illegal immigration or the drugs that have been coming into this country through the border. You're right, it just is going to make things more expensive for our consumers here in America and for the businesses that rely on imported goods. And I think there are probably other more effective ways besides imposing hefty tariffs to combat too much illegal immigration and drugs.
Sure, yes. There are other better ways, I think, and one of those might be to work more carefully and cooperatively with the Mexican government. While I know they have problems with the legality of some of the people in their government when it comes to drug cartels, nevertheless trying to somehow clamp down on the drug cartels and the drugs coming across the southern border, rather than initiating tariffs, really is, I think, a better way of trying to get at that problem.
Exactly. Working together, I think, would probably be more effective. But you're right, putting these tariffs into place, we're obviously upsetting Canada and we're upsetting our other trading partners. And it doesn't seem like that's going to work out the best for us. We rely on them heavily for a lot of the goods that we use in this country. And so I don't know how well we would do without access to trade from them.
Sure. When you have friends who you have a history of treating each other cooperatively, of paying for each other's things if you're going on a trip, for example, or if you are just simply hanging out downtown, you share. Sometimes you buy the food, sometimes someone else buys the food. You take turns. This is a matter of one person saying to the other, you're going to take care of me and you're going to take care of me for a week. And the other person will say, well, what about me? And you say, well, I may help out later on, we'll see. Causing that kind of friction in a friendship that Canada and the United States have just doesn't seem reasonable.
I agree, and now the European Union is getting involved, and it just doesn't seem like, you know, a developing trade war is in the best interest for Americans.
Sure, and the trade wars do nothing but raise prices and raise conflict. The term war, of course, certainly suggests that there is a conflict.
Of course.
And the steeper the tariffs, the greater the conflict, it seems to me. One of the things that we don't often remember is if you go back to 1929 and the beginning of the Great Depression, one of the things that existed then was what was called the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, in which countries around the world levied high tariffs on one another to try to protect the manufacturing of the products in their own countries.
Wow.
Well, and so Donald Trump is taking us back 100 years almost to that event and not understanding the implications of what's happened based on the history of what happened.
Very true, and I think that's a great connection that you made back in, you said it was 1929. Yeah. It is important, you know, if we don't learn from some of the mistakes that we've made in the past historically, we're just going to end up making the same mistakes. And I don't think Americans want to be taken back to what's been happening over the last 100 years. I think we want to move forward and see better and do better. So we're going to have to see how this continues to develop over the next few months. But unfortunately, that's all we have for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of Inside the System. Have a happy St. Patrick's Day and see you next time.